Welcome, family, to another edition of Stranger Thinking Media, where we address the problems of a modern world. So stay tuned. We have an awesome show for you tonight. And today's topic will address Jerusalem 70 AD, a microcosm of the end times. Let's check it out. The agenda: that great city, earth equals land, not world, and your house left desolate. Welcome to our channel. Please like and subscribe and hit the notification bell if you like what you see. It's a lot of information here. And I thank you for chiming in. And let's get on with it. Revelation 17, verse 4. And the woman was arrayed in purple and scarlet color and decked with gold and precious stones and pearls, having a golden cup in her hand full of abominations and the filthiness of her fornication. And we're going to do a deep dive into that. Just bear with me. And we're going to break down a few, I guess you would call them stereotypes of what we tend to think of as Mystery Babylon, the woman that rides the beast, versus what the scriptures say. But remember, scriptures are line upon line, precept upon precept, here a little and there a little. So you have to put it all together. And so there were things that Hamashiach, the Messiah, said that would come to pass in that generation that was living at the time. And literally, all his prophecies came true. But remember who he's talking to, and I think sometimes we get that confused. In what we call the church age, people reading the Bible think in terms of, oh, he's talking to us, he's talking about us, or, you know. What you have to understand is this book was written by Hebrews, to Hebrews, and for Hebrews. You got to understand that. If you don't understand that, you can't see it from the perspective of the writers. And you can't see it from the perspective, for instance, of John on the Isle of Patmos when he's seeing these visions. But we're going to get into that a little bit, and we're not going to try to sum it up all up in this video, but understand this concept of Jerusalem being a microcosm of the world system. We'll talk a little more about that. Anyways, let's look at that term, that great city, Ezekiel chapter 16, verse 2. Son of man, cause Jerusalem to know her abominations, and say, thus saith the Lord God unto Jerusalem, thy birth and thy nativity is of the land of Canaan. Thy father was an Amorite, and thy mother a Hittite. All nations that were known to practice pagan abominations and rituals. And so he's likening Jerusalem to that because that's what they had become. And so, as you just read, if you go back to the book of the Revelation of Jesus Christ, it talked about the woman that rides the beast as being full of abominations. And here we go. That term comes up here, right? And we never think of it that way. We tend to throw that, I know how everyone's been taught, especially in Christianity, that especially Protestant Christianity, that term is designated for a specific group. And yes, it does look that way, but there's so much connected here. It's not as simple as you think. It's not static. It's a very dynamic thing. So what I'm saying is, if you pay attention, a lot of stuff that the Messiah prophesied to happen actually did happen, during the time of 70 AD when Jerusalem was destroyed. And from a Hebrew Judean perspective, to them, it was like the end of the world, and the armies encompassed them about, and everything that prophet said is actually happening, and so that's how they were viewing it. And so they, and I can go more in depth, but I'm going to focus on that part right now. So his prophecies were being fulfilled, and yet it was just a microcosm because there's an end story that's even bigger, and it's global. And there are groups out there that think, oh, the All the prophecies came true. And so it all ended there, and the kingdom is some invisible kingdom now that's reigning now. You know, if this is all you read, you could deduce that. However, there are so many other prophecies that talk about the latter days in the end times. In other words, what happened to Jerusalem was just a microcosm of something much bigger that's going to happen later on. And that there's an actual world ruling kingdom that starts here on earth, because the earth was created for a reason, not just for us to run around on and mess up. It was created for a reason, and it was created perfect. And originally, Adam was charged with doing a certain thing on earth, and he was the first Adam. Well, the first Adam wasn't able to achieve it on earth. So the second Adam, Yahushua HaMashiach, the Messiah, colloquially called Jesus the Christ, right? He's the second Adam, and he actually has to finish the job. And that means setting up and performing the duties that essentially that Adam was not able to accomplish through his fall. So anyway, we'll dig a little further into this, but I want to connect the dots here. Yes, I know everybody says when they describe Mystery Babylon, riding the beast, and I've talked about that in other videos. Yes, that's kind of part 2. I mean, massive part 2. But let's drop back to minor part 1, which is a microcosm of the macrocosm, if that makes sense. This is a trailer, a preview of what's going to happen in the end time. So if you read the books of Josephus and the Wars of the Jews, you know how horrible it actually got in Jerusalem. Well, take that and times 7 it, only on a global scale. That's what's coming. So you can't take that certain view that says, see, everything was already fulfilled, and the 1,000-year millennial reign is this invisible thing. Well, no, because there's a bunch of other prophecies that you would have to throw out the window or rationalize out in some unscriptural way for you to suggest that it ended here. Because if it had ended here, then what are we doing now? What's the point of everything? It doesn't make sense. And I know what some people say, oh, well, it's all done and he's in heaven or reigning there. And except these other prophets talk about him reigning here, and all nations, the book of Zechariah, all nations coming to Jerusalem from year to year to observe the Feast of Tabernacles. And you can read that, but that's not the focus of this video. Just understand that what happened in Jerusalem was the predecessor to something much bigger. And we'll get into that later. Keeping with the topic of that great city, reading out of the book of Ezekiel, chapter 16, and verse 10. He's describing, the Most High is describing what he did for Israel, and specifically Jerusalem, which, when you read this description, it sounds a lot like that woman riding the beast. Okay, so let's read. I clothed thee also with broidered work, and shod thee with badger skins. That was a big deal back then, That was good clothing, And I girded thee about with fine linen, and I covered thee with silk. I decked thee also with ornaments, and I put bracelets upon thy hands, and a chain on thy neck. So the Most High, he decked out his bride. You know what I'm saying? He gave her everything, and made her look like essentially like a queen on earth, So you're starting to get the picture that, hey, they're talking about Jerusalem using the same language as they talk about Mystery Babylon. Yeah, so wait a minute. Everybody's like locked in on the Vatican. Well, let's not throw the baby out with the bathwater. Let's talk about what happened at the time of Messiah And he told them that that generation would see it, right? But also, in the end times, that generation that sees the first sign will see all things. So he's talking. It's almost like he's talking on levels. So anyway, we'll get into it. And then the Most High says to Jerusalem, and I put a jewel on thy forehead, and earrings in thine ears, and a beautiful crown upon thine head. Thus wast thou decked with gold and silver, and thy raiment was of fine linen and silk embroidered work. Thou didst eat fine flour and honey and oil, and thou wast exceeding beautiful, and thou didst prosper into a kingdom. So everything's set up. This woman is set up. All she has to do is obey those commandments and choose life, like Joshua did. As for me and my house, he chose the right way. But let's see how it degenerates into. You know what I'm saying? So Revelation 17, and the woman which thou sawest is that great city, which reigneth over the kings of the earth. And we'll get into that term earth. People are just missing the boat on that one. When they're talking about earth, it has, that's a King James rendering of a Hebrew word. And so we're going to talk about that. But this woman is that great city, and that term is also used elsewhere. You follow? So it's not, even though it's in Revelation, and we're thinking in terms of Mystery Babylon as this other organization, and I'm not going to say it's not in the last days. I'm not going to say it is. I'm just saying this term is used, that great city is used for Jerusalem. So let's think that through. So wait a minute. Could Jerusalem be Mystery Babylon? Well, Jerusalem being the microcosm of the world system and its position and place and its relationship to the Roman Empire, the beast that was, is not, and yet is. And look at what ends up happening to Jerusalem. We'll talk about that. And it fulfills that prophetic utterance of John on Patmos. But again, it's just a small microcosm of something much bigger that's coming before an actual kingdom is set up on earth. There's no way around it. Don't sit there saying all the prophecies are fulfilled and that's it. That's the end. Well, what about the millennial reign? Well, see, the word, I've heard a guy say this. The word 1,000 years doesn't really mean 1,000 years. Well, the Bible talks about that term 1,000 years is but a day. Well, what that means is a day could be 1,000 years. What that's emphatically not saying is that it won't be 1,000 years. You follow? What we know it won't be is a day. Or the millennial reign is talked about in several places. In fact, the Sabbath itself is emblematic of the millennial reign, the seventh 1,000-year period from Adam. And this is a real thing. You have to dodge around so much to come to a conclusion that there will be no millennial reign, and that's nuts. So the old prophets talk about the reign. Zechariah definitely talks about it. Isaiah even gives you a description of what's going to go on in the millennial reign of the Messiah. And that's not even to mention the apocryphal writings like Second Esdras. So what I'm saying is, if there are people who for whatever reason, I don't know if they're deceived or not, who want to do away with the millennial reign of Christ. But if you think about it, that's part of Babylon, the system of Babylon, where everybody worships on Sunday rather than the Sabbath, because the Sabbath actually represents the millennial reign of Christ. Babylon pushes everybody to Sunday and is basically saying, let's just skip that millennial reign of Christ. Let's just skip that Sabbath thing. We'll create this Sunday thing, which is not the Sabbath. So they've bypassed the Sabbath, which represents the millennial reign of the Messiah. And that's what these other folks out here are saying. Oh, yeah, there's no real millennial reign on earth. That's what these churches teach. That's I'm trying to tell you, it's not. If you do away with the Sabbath, you're doing away with the millennial reign of Christ, going straight to the first day. And that's not what's going to happen. So surprise, surprise when it happens. You know what I'm saying? So anyway, and then they talk in Revelations 11, verse 8, again, the great city. And their dead bodies shall lie in the street of the great city, which spiritually is called Sodom and Egypt. In other words, not godly, very pagan, very sinful, where also our Lord was crucified. So this city, this great city, was the place where Messiah was crucified. Well, that wasn't Rome. That wasn't the Vatican. It wasn't New York. It wasn't the United States. It was Jerusalem, right? So now the great city has a name, Jerusalem, which is spiritually, at the time, called Sodom and Egypt. Go figure that one out. And so let's prove that one out. Where was he crucified? They said Golgotha, which means bald head or place of the skull. Okay, so let's see. Skull-shaped hill in ancient Jerusalem. In Jerusalem. And there's a reason for that, because he makes utterances about prophets, always being killed inside of Jerusalem. And that was the site of Jesus' crucifixion, or Yahushua's crucifixion. It is referenced to in all four Gospels. The hill of execution was outside the city walls of Jerusalem, apparently near a road and not far from the sepulchre where Yahushua was buried. Its exact location is uncertain, but most scholars prefer either the spot now covered by the Church of the Holy Sepulchre on a hillock called Gordon's Calvary, just north of the Damascus Gate. Wow, so we're seeing that great city is the place where the Messiah was crucified, which is Jerusalem. That was the Encyclopedia Britannica. In case you're questioning, what I'm saying, you can question them, I guess. Revelations chapter 17 and verse 5. And upon her forehead was a name written, Mystery Babylon, Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots and abominations of the earth. So she's the mother of abominations, but we saw in Ezekiel that Jerusalem was accused of abominations, and she was decked with gold and silver and had jewels on her forehead. And is this hitting home? Is this striking home? I'm not saying that's when it ended, and that, remember Jerusalem. Remember, judgment starts at the house of God, right? Those were God's people, right? He says, I'm going to show the people in the end times what their fate will be if they don't get it together. Come out of her, my people. Come out of her. In that case, it was, don't be in Jerusalem. Get out of Jerusalem. Get out of Jerusalem and flee into the wilderness, right? And they fled primarily into Africa and Babylon. And, history describes where they went, despite the educational system that we have here, which teaches you some weird stuff. But there's actual history written long ago that says where the children of Israel, or the Judeans, at least in this case, where they ran to. And Africa was a big place because the Roman Empire had no jurisdiction there. It just makes sense, right? You're not going to run into the teeth of the dragon. You're not going to make it easy if you're running. They're running where he ain't. So You just use a little common sense there. You can get by. Um, you'll be able to see through the nonsense that's being bandied around. So the earth is equal to land and not world. And a lot of people don't get that. I've heard all sorts of machinations where people say, "Oh, earth means this or that." The scriptures, they interpret themselves. Whenever they use this word, and we're going to get into what the word is, what it actually means. And remember, these are Hebrews writing to other Hebrews, essentially. So what do you think they were talking about? Things that affect Hebrews, in this case, Judeans. And that's the hardest part for people to get, because they have this concept in their head that, oh, we've replaced Israel. So it's everything that was written then was written, using our modern day understandings, we can understand what he was writing. No, you have to put yourself in the place of a Judean who believed that Hamashiach had come and had fulfilled a work and was coming back. And you have to look at it from that perspective. And their perspective was always Israel. That was their perspective. And they were shocked when Peter said that the Gentiles had received the Holy Spirit. Anyway, they were shocked because they're looking at everything from the Hebrew point of view. And that's something we have a difficult time with now, because we don't understand what the Hebrew point of view was, because we've been taught all sorts of other things that obscure that, as if the Most High has thrown away his people. And yet throughout the book, he says, I will never throw you away. I will never depart from you. I'll always be there. You will have to learn lessons, but I will be there for you. So anyway, the word earth is, there's a place in Revelations where they talk about a beast coming up out of the earth. And I've heard people fumble with that one. But when they talk about a beast coming up out of the earth, the translation is the Hebrew word gay, right? And that word means essentially arable land, the ground, the earth as a standing place, generally actually meaning the land, and usually referring to the promised land, Judea. You follow? So when they talk about the beast up out of the earth, that should give you a new perspective on this beast up out of the earth. It has two horns, no crowns, but two horns. And it looks like a lamb, but it speaks as a dragon. So when this second beast comes up out of the earth, I want you to start thinking in terms of the Holy Land, right? Now, I do have a thought that it could be just amongst his people, right? A wicked Israelite. It could be that too, right? So, but generally when they say land, they're referring actually to Palestine, what we call Palestine today. So just keep your eyes peeled. So, and if they had actually meant the world, they would have used the word cosmos, which is generally the word used for world. They wouldn't have used the word gay, which actually stands for literal land, dirt, farmland. You know what I'm saying? So that's what they're talking about there. And let's continue. So earth doesn't equal land, or earth equals land, not world, I should say that. Anyway, Revelation 17, verse 6. And I saw the woman drunken with the blood of the saints and with the blood of the martyrs of Yahusha. And when I saw her, I wondered with great admiration. Well, not admiration. He was thrown for a loop. He was in awe. And I don't mean a good awe, just like, what was that show they used to have with the little kid, Home Alone, with both hands on his cheeks, with his, like in great awe, of something crazy that's happening, right? So he wondered with great awe or admiration, is what King James said, right? So he's looking at this drunk woman, drunk with the blood of the saints. Now let's see. Yeah, there's times in history where they talk about martyrdom, of the saints. But where does that martyrdom of the Kodashim? I don't like that word saint so much. I prefer to go back to the Hebrew language. So the Kodashim, where do they start getting martyred? I wonder. Could it be? Is it possible? We know about the Romans throwing Christians to the lions. I don't like necessarily using that term either. But the Romans were throwing the Kodashim to the lions. Yeah, that's a better way of saying it, so we don't get our wires crossed. But the Kodashim, colloquially called saints and sometimes called Christians, to put that in perspective. But where does that happen first? Let's read Matthew chapter 23, verse 34. Wherefore, behold, I send unto you prophets and wise men and scribes, and some of them ye shall kill and crucify, and some of them shall ye scourge in your synagogues, and persecute them from city to city. Oh, shoot. Notice they say, scourge in your synagogues. Well, that doesn't sound like the Vatican to me. That doesn't sound like Rome to me. That sounds more like Jerusalem. And persecute them from city to city, that upon you may come all the righteous blood shed upon the earth, from the blood of righteous Abel unto the blood of Zacharias, son of Barachias, whom ye slew between the temple and the altar. Verily, and by the way, that's the horns of the altar. That's like the mercy seat. If you grab onto the horns of the altar, as long as you're doing that, nobody should be able to touch you. And so this is an instance where they did. And there's one other instance where Joab, in the Old Testament, King Solomon told Benaiah, the new captain of the host, go get him. And Joab, knowing the rules, ran into the temple and clung to the horns of the altar. And Benaiah was like, yeah, whatever. And that was the end of Joab. But anyways, whom ye slew between the temple and the altar, verily I say unto you, all these things shall come upon this generation. See, so what Messiah was saying is this generation here at that time would see all this stuff, right? But at the same time, in the last days, on the macro level, that generation that sees the first sign will also see the last sign. It's going to all happen in whoever's seeing that first sign is like, we're going to see this whole thing play out. All right, so you picking up what I'm putting down? I knew that you would. So, yeah, that might put things in a little different perspective. Revelation chapter 17 and verse 6. And I saw a woman, here we go again, and I saw a woman drunken with the blood of the saints and with the blood of the martyrs of Yahusha. And when I saw her, I wondered with great wonder, right? The blood of the martyrs of Yahusha, colloquially called Jesus. But anyway, let's see the end. Your house is left desolate. Let's see that word desolate. Whose house was left desolate? Well, you guys really need to read the Wars of the Jews. Everything Messiah said would happen to Jerusalem and to the people, and that they would be held accountable for everybody. Like, he went back to the time of Abel, righteous Abel, and said, that generation, the ones who are not going to follow me, you guys, all that blood that's been spilt of these righteous people, it's going to be required of you. You people, right? That's what he's saying. And so read the Wars of the Jews. You'll see how bad it got. People were eating their own babies. The corpses were rotting. They were throwing them over the wall. Even Titus was like, he washed his hands of this, and he was like praying to God or whatever God he was worshiping. He said, I didn't tell them to do this. They should just give up, man. I didn't mean for all this to happen. He followed, even he was like, this is crazy. You know what I'm saying? So Matthew 23. O Jerusalem, Jerusalem, thou that killest the prophets and stonest them which are sent unto thee, how often would I have gathered thy children together, even as a hen gathereth her chickens under her wings, and ye would not. Behold, your house is left unto you desolate. Desolation shall come. Matthew chapter 23, verse 36. And verily I say unto you, all these things shall come upon this generation. Who's he talking to? He's talking to his disciples, and he's talking about this generation. You guys, if you're not martyred, you'll get to see this. It's going to happen in your lifetime. But also, on the macro level, because of writings of Isaiah and Zechariah and Obadiah, there's things that have to, and Joel, there are things that have to come to pass that didn't actually come to pass then. So he's telling you, this is just a preview, a trailer of the big movie that's coming, right? And the 1,000-year millennial reign of the Messiah. And then the Father comes down, at the end of the reign of 1,000 years. But before the Father will come down, Satan is let loose for a season, and he has to be finally put away. And Gog and Magog has to be put away. And then after all that's done, then the great white throne judgment, then the Father comes down to live. You understand what I'm saying? There's a actually step-by-step process, and it seems like people don't get it. I think everybody's still thinking you die and you're going to heaven and playing a harp for eternity and chilling out. Really? Is that why you think Father Yah took the time to build all this for you to do that, for you to float on a cloud playing a harp for eternity? Come on, guys. You should watch some of my other videos because I go into that. And I think I have to just keep playing this over and over until it sinks in. There's a process and a plan. Okay? So we'll continue. Your house is left desolate. Luke chapter 21, verse 20. And when ye shall see Jerusalem compassed about with armies, then you know that the desolation thereof is nigh. They talked about the desolation. But remember, didn't they talk about that the mystery Babylon, the harlot that rides the beast, would be left desolate? You see, the beast, the Roman Empire is the beast it was, is not. But yet it is. It comes back. And so the first beast is ridden by this woman that's being described. And that woman is Jerusalem. Right? And what we know what the Romans did, they left Jerusalem desolate, burnt her with fire. There's something bigger coming in the last days, though. Something bigger. Who is going to be riding the beast in the last days? That's a good question. And I have some ideas, and I don't think I'm going to say what my ideas are, but we'll hold on to those with two fingers for now. As time goes on, things will become more obvious. But you shouldn't just because you don't know. And if you're just locked into a certain way of thinking, you're going to miss the boat when the time comes. You have to understand what the principles, and then keep your eyes open to see how this thing is playing out. But we know that Jerusalem was left desolate by the beast, the Roman Empire, in 70 A.D. Again, read the works of Josephus, the wars of the Jews, and the antiquities of the Jews. It's interesting stuff. So there's so much referenced outside of the 66 books of the Bible. But anyway, we'll get more into that and down the road. and we'll make everybody experts. So farewell, everyone. This is part 1. I got another part 2 explaining more of the end. I love you all so much. Thank you so much for continually supporting my content. And if you did enjoy this video, hit the thumbs up button and subscribe, turn on the notification bell, and share this with your friends and family. I very much appreciate you all, and shout out to the channel members. And may everybody have a beautiful and blessed day who's in the body of Messiah, Yahushua HaMashiach, Jesus the Christ of Nazareth. And I'll see you on the next video. Shalom.